So much has gone on in preparing for Christmas. Look around. This place is beautifully decorated. Your homes have been decorated, and the trees are lit, and so there's all this preparation, and then we're going to have a celebration on Tuesday night, on Christmas Eve, and that's a wonderful night. So, but here's the question: with all this preparation that's gone on and getting ready for Christmas, well, when do you put Christmas away? I mean, some families wait until New Year's Day, and that's when they start, taking down the tree and putting away the Christmas cards and taking the lights out and putting away the nativity scene. And before that very first day of the new year is finished, well, so is Christmas. So it is for another year. And I would suspect that for most folks, they'll put Christmas away after the gifts have been opened on Christmas morning. I don't mean the trappings of Christmas. I mean the essence of Christmas. What Christmas is really all about. This month, the talk has been about Jesus and his birth, about the angels and the magi, shepherds and the mangers. But that will be done by Boxing Day, and by the time Boxing Day, the sun goes down, it's all done. But for many people who identify themselves in some way with Christ and with this church, the baby Jesus will be packed up with the manger scene and tucked away until Easter. I love Christmas Eve, and I consider that to be one of our primary outreach events of the year. It's an opportunity for us to invite people into the presence of Jesus Christ. And for the non-church, the non-aligned, the non-committed, I think it's great that we have the opportunity to present the gospel to them in such a positive way. But there are people who will see that night. People that will see that night, and we won't see them again until Easter Sunday. And if you were to ask them, they will tell you that, oh yeah, we're Christians, and we follow Jesus at least twice a year. And yet, somehow they seem quite content to leave Jesus either in the cradle or on the cross. And that certainty isn't a new phenomenon. I mean, 2,000 years ago at that first Christmas, and then 33 years later, when Christ was murdered, there were those who were participants in that event. And yet, it had no impact on their lives whatsoever. It was merely an incident that happened when they moved on, and then they just never looked back. I mean, the innkeeper and the soldiers were there. I mean, how could they know that by simply just doing their jobs, that they were actually assured of a place in history? Granted, we don't know their names, but out of all the innkeepers since the beginning of time, well, this is the one whose story really stands out, simply because he was the one who had the one line, "We have no room." The innkeeper's story is recorded in Luke chapter 2. She gave birth to her first son, her first child, a son. She wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no lodging available for them. You see, the inn had been packed out for days because of the census that was going on. Well, but when you think about it, do we really know if the inn was actually full? Or if we need to take a closer look at the phrase, there was no lodging available for them. You see, Luke didn't say that there was no room in the inn. What he said was that there was no room for them in the inn. It made me think about, I wonder if demand had outstripped supply and the prices had soared beyond the reach of ordinary person, but they kind of looked like they were homeless. I mean, wonder if there would have been room in the inn if Joseph had been one of Herod's carpenters. Maybe he was somebody considered important. The soldiers get more than a verse because it's all part of that same story in John chapter 19. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him again and again, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they struck him in the face. But that wasn't anything personal. I mean, they would have done the same if it had been Barabbas or any other criminal. It was just a way to break up their day. And their cruelty was actually an impersonal cruelty. They mocked him because they could. They were in power, and he wasn't. They considered themselves to be in the right, and for him to be in the wrong. So they saw that was their right. But at the end of the day, they had forgotten the one to whom they called the King of the Jews was the Christ. The innkeeper and the soldiers were symbolic of the vast majority of the people present on that Christmas day. The innkeeper didn't know that it was the Son of God that he had turned away. And the soldiers didn't know that it was the Son of God that they had nailed him to the cross. To them, it was just business. Isn't that the way that it is today? People rush around, go about their business. They go here, they go there. There are trees to find and trim. There's Christmas trees to light up, presents to buy and wrap, a turkey to stuff and cook. And the entire season has become something of a cult in itself. And there's lots of people out there who are not antagonistic about the real meaning of Christmas. No, that it's just that they just don't care. They really don't care that Christ was born. They don't really care that he lived for 33 years. And they don't care that he died on a cross for them. And they don't care that after the third day, he rose from the dead. For them, there was no Christmas Eve service, no Christmas Day service, no Christmas story, no Sunday school programs. They'll get paid a few days off of work, a little bit of a holiday, enjoy some turkey and the presents, and like the old TV ad from Toyota that said, "Who could ask for anything more?" But there was a more antagonistic presence at both that first Christmas and that first Easter. And they were a father and a son. You see, There were two Herods there that day, 33 years apart. You'll recall in the Christmas story, the wise men from the east came to Jerusalem to ask directions to Bethlehem and the newborn king. You remember that? And Herod asked the Magi to come back and let him know where he could go to worship the child. But his motives were less than pure. Herod asked the Magi to come back and let him know where he could go to worship this child. No, that's not what he meant. You see, Herod was evil, pure evil. And he was extremely suspicious that others were trying to take his power. As a matter of fact, it's recorded that he murdered his wife and his mother-in-law. Mother-in-laws, rest easy. And he also murdered 3 of his sons, all afraid that they would want to take his power. And we're told that Augustus, the Roman emperor, had said, it's safer to be a Herod's pig than a Herod's son, which is a more poetic way of saying in the Greek, where the word for pig was hus, and the son was name for pig was God. Some people might wonder why genocide like this wouldn't really be mentioned much in history. I mean, remember that at the time, Bethlehem probably had a population of no more than 2,000 people. And yet, even then, we're talking about Herod's order to kill all of the newborn children. We're talking about the possibility of maybe 25 to 30 children that would be killed. In a time when murder was and unrighteousness was so widespread that the only people who really would have been upset by that would have been the parents. But 33 years later, Jesus was introduced to another Herod. This one was Herod Antipas, the son of the man who slaughtered the innocents in Bethlehem. And this Herod had blood on his hands as well. The account was given in Luke chapter 23. When Herod learned that Jesus when Pilate learned that Jesus was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at the time. So you understand the time sequence of what's happened here? Jesus has been arrested by the high priests, who don't actually have any authority to do anything to Jesus. So they offload him to Pilate, demanding Jesus' execution. But Pilate can find no legal or moral reason to execute Jesus. So he figures, well, he could get rid of the problem by delegating him back to Herod. Herod was the puppet king of the area. So Luke tells us that Herod had heard about Jesus, and he was actually kind of delighted to have the opportunity to actually met this teacher that everyone had been talking about. But this wasn't the Jesus that Herod was expecting. Herod demanded answers. Jesus remained silent. Herod demanded that Jesus perform miracles, and yet Jesus remained silent. So Herod had him beaten and sent back to Pilate, even though he knew that it was the wrong thing to do. And you understand that Pilate was looking for a way to spare Jesus' life, even if he was too cowardly to do it himself. Herod had the opportunity to shine, to be more of a man than his father was, and to do the right thing, but he didn't. The scriptures say that Herod mocked and ridiculed Jesus. I wonder if Herod knew what his father had done just 33 years before. I mean, so he could connect the dots, do you think? Do you think he realized what was going on? Probably not. Probably nothing that he would brag about. But I would suspect that neither Herod the Great nor his son Herod gave their actions much thought, really. They were not only ambivalent to what was happening at that first Christmas and Easter, they were downright antagonistic. Herod was definitely hostile to the true meaning of Christmas. A sociologist by the name of Robert Lind said this: "There are some people who want to throw their arms around you simply because it's Christmas. And then there are other people who want to strangle you simply because it's Christmas." I think Herod would fall into that second category of people. It's not Christmas that people like Herod really resent. It's the religious nature of Christmas. They're kind of like those two ladies I heard about who spotted a cross in a store window at Easter time, and one commented to the other, "Look at that. Some people will try to put religion into everything." People like that like Christmas, but they prefer to keep Christ out of it. They would rather see us trade the manger for a toy store. They would have us swap Jesus for Santa. And they would exchange the cross for a Christmas tree. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of those things unless they replace what Christmas is really about. I mean, our kids, when they were little, they would light up around Santa. It was a lot of fun at Christmas time with Santa and the fat man in the red suit. But he had to take a back seat to Jesus Christ, didn't he? And there are others there as well. Remember the shepherds and the Roman centurion? They were there. That night there were shepherds staying in the fields nearby, guarding their flocks and sheep. They hurried to the village and found Mary and Joseph, and there was the baby lying in a manger. Sometimes I think of the shepherds as a bit of a flash in the pan about Christmas. I mean, after all, who wouldn't be impressed about that engraved invitation that they received about going and checking out the baby? They had this great choir of angels who told them about the Christ child, and that moved them into action. And so, after seeing him, the shepherds told everything what had happened and what the angel had said to them about this child. Wow, what an exciting time for them, eh? But that's all he wrote. We don't hear any more about the shepherds. No aged shepherd making his way to the cross 33 years later to weep at the feet of Christ as he saw the fulfillment of that promise. None of the disciples were shepherds. There were no surprise witnesses at the trial of Jesus. No, they stayed in Bethlehem. For them, it was too far to travel to Calvary. When the chills and the thrills of the night stopped, they were assimilated into everyday life. At the cross, there was an eureka moment on behalf of one of the men who took part of the execution. He saw something that nobody noticed before. When the Roman officers overseeing the execution saw what had happened, he worshiped God and said, "Surely this man was innocent." In the NIV, it reads, the centurion seeing what had happened, praised God and said, "Surely this was a righteous man." But there's no mention of the centurion again. He doesn't show up in the upper room with the disciples. We don't read about him being a witness to the other Roman soldiers. Tradition is silent on his fate. And very seldom is tradition silent, if there is even a whisper of a story. Do you remember that first miracle that was recorded in John's gospel? It was when Jesus was at the wedding in Cana and he turned the water into wine. Listen to what the Bible said right after that in John chapter 2. Because of the miraculous signs Jesus did in Jerusalem at the Passover celebration, many began to trust in him. And why not? I mean, it's easy to believe when someone feeds 5,000 people with a few loaves of bread and a couple of fish. It's easy to, when someone turns 180 gallons of water into wine, well, it's easy to believe. When a multitude of the heavenly hosts proclaim the truth from a celestial choir all about that. It's not always easy to maintain that belief, is it? Especially when you're sick, when the kids are crying, when the washing machine is overflowing, and when your car won't start, or when you get laid off work, or your spouse leaves you, or when your parents are dying. It's hard to believe in the midst of all that. All of a sudden, belief isn't nearly as easy, but yet that's life, isn't it? And we can't live forever in the manger at Bethlehem. The reason that the Christian faith and the Christian church has survived and flourished over these past 2,000 years is that there have been someone who, after the angels have gone and the heavens are still, they still believe. There are those who profess. There are those who profess to keep Christ in Christmas. And they do. But the problem is not only do they keep Christ in Christmas, they leave him there on Boxing Day and beyond. The shepherds were an integral part of Christmas, but I really wish that we had seen them again somewhere outside of Bethlehem. Mary and the angels were there. The only common denominators that we see in Jesus' birth and death, besides Jesus, were the angels who announced his birth and resurrection, and Jesus' mother. The angels that were there, it was their job description. And Mary was there because Jesus was her son. But there's more to it than that. Mary's life was changed forever by the child that she had that day. Every moment of every day would be changed from that point on. You see, Mary's life wasn't just a half-hearted experience or a part-time commitment. No. Mary was 100% committed to the child that she called Jesus. And there, she was there at the cross when her son died. When Luke lists the beginning of the church, in the book of Acts, he lists this. They all joined together constantly in prayer, along with the woman and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and with his brothers. And that is what he is looking for today. He wants each of us to come to the manger with the same attitude as Mary had when she said, I am the Lord's servant. Amen.